What's up everybody, welcome back. So last week I had a pretty busy week and I wasn't able to record any other videos, but we're gonna continue with our Mac project today. So in the last episode we set up everything so we can fire the Mac, and we could already walk around with it, so we have a little base to start with. And now in this episode we're gonna set up some enemies so we actually have something to shoot at and something shoots at us. So it's probably going to be a little bit longer video because I want to do most of the stuff for the enemy in one video except for the shooting. We're gonna do that in the next video. Okay, so let's start rolling. We have our Paragon Right character, and we're gonna go in here to the characters folder and then heroes and then right again. And over here we have the default character for him. So let's open this up. Excuse me. And we're not actually gonna use anything that is in here. So first of all, we want to delete everything from the event graph. Let's get rid of that. And we also want to delete all the variables that are already in here. So let's get rid of all of those. And the event dispatcher, we can delete that as well. So we have an empty character to start with. And this one has a camera boom and a follow camera. And we're not going to use it as a playable character. So we can actually get rid of the camera and the spring arm as well. So if we compile it right now, then the animations are gone and the warnings are gone, and we have our empty graph to work with. Now the first thing I'm going to do is actually close it back down, and I'm going to rename it to BP enemy right. And let's see if we get any redirectors from that. So other filters show redirectors. No, that's good to go. Then let's create a new folder for this guy. So we're going to go back to our root folder, and I'm going to create enemies. And in there I'm going to create a folder for right. There we go. So let's move this guy over to our new folder. In here, move it. So now we actually have a redirector. Let's fix that immediately. So update references, and I'm going to delete the unreferenced redirectors. So that's gone. We're not going to use the animation blueprint either, but we're going to get back to that in a little bit. The first thing I want to do right now is go to our enemies folder, and the same thing as we did for our projectiles, we're going to create a parent and child blueprint setup. So I'm going to create a parent blueprint for the enemies. So let's create a new blueprint class and select the character. And let's call this our BP enemy base. So in here we're going to put all the default stuff that all of the enemies need, like movement and some variables and things like that. So we only have to do some specific work for each character inside of the child blueprint. So that makes our life a little bit easier. And first of all, let's open our enemy base, and in here we want to go to the class default, and we need to make sure that we enable set auto possess AI and placed in world or spawned. So that's going to be pretty much all the way down, I think, over here under the pawn settings. So we want to say auto possess AI to placed in world or spawned, both of them. So that should be good. And then we want to reparent our right character to this base character. So we're going to close this one down, open up our right character. And if we go to the class settings, you can see the parent class over here. So currently it's simply a character, and we're going to change this to our BP enemy base over here. And that's all we need to do. Now we want to set up some class defaults for this guy as well. So let's go to the class defaults, and we want to go to orient rotation to movement. So let's just look for that one, orient rotation, and we want to disable this. So let's turn that one off, and we want to reset the rotation rate to 360 degrees per second. So let's look for the rotation rate. That's under the character movement settings, and we're going to reset this one, so the z-axis, to 360. And then we want to enable use controller rotation yaw. So let's look for that one as well. Use controller rotation, and we're gonna enable the yaw over here. Turn that one on. And the last thing I'm gonna do is change the mesh. So this is optional, obviously. You can keep the white guy if you want to, but I'm gonna change it to the lunar ops one. So he has a bit of a red skin, so that looks a little bit better for an enemy in my opinion, but do whatever you want. Okay, so this is the default that we're going to work with, and first of all let's take a look at setting up the animation blueprint. So as I mentioned, we're not going to use the one that already came with the pack, so let's get rid of it over here, set it to none, and then we can safely delete the old one as well. So that's under the heroes right folder. We can get rid of this one. We probably need to save everything first. So there are no more references. Let's force delete it. And we also don't need the level, by the way, so let's get rid of that as well. Why not? I'm going to go back to the right folder and create a new animation blueprint. So that's under the animation class, and then select animation blueprint, and in here we need to select the right skeleton, so that's all the way down for me, and click create. So this is our ABB enemy right, and we're going to make this really simple, by the way. It's a really basic animation blueprint, but I thought it would be funny to actually show how to set it up in case you don't know it. So we're going to cover everything that we need to do in here. And the first thing we also need for this is a BlendSpace to make our lives a little bit easier. So again, I'm going to right click, go to animation, and then under the legacy over here, we can create a one-dimensional BlendSpace. So we're not going to use any directions in here. And then we need to select the right skeleton again. And I'm going to call this my BlendSpace enemy right. And let's set this one up first. So on the left side under the axis settings, we want to expand this, and we're going to name this our speed axis. And let me grab my example to check what animations I'm using. So I'm simply using, let me see over here. So we have the idle non-combat and the jog forward animation. So in here I'm going to look for idle. And they have a lot of idle animations, so I'm gonna pick this one, idle non-combat, not the additive one, but the normal one. Simply drag it in over here and put that on the 0 point. And then I was gonna use jog forward. And that's the maximum running speed, so I'm simply gonna put this all the way to the right. Now we want to set up the axis over here, so the minimum value is 0, that's fine. The maximum value is going to be 600. Grid divisions 4, that's fine. We can say snap to grid, so this will actually snap to the grid lines, and we need to make sure this is all the way to the right. And we can add a little bit of smoothing, so I'm going to set the smoothing time to 0.2 seconds, and then simply keep the defaults over here. That should be okay. And that's really all we need to do in here. So this is a really simple blend space, and it's not really fluid, but it's going to work for us since we're only going to use maximum run speed or standing still. So this is fine. Let's save it and close this one down. And we're going to open our animation blueprint and actually set this one up. So the first thing we want to do inside of the animation blueprint is set up our blueprint thread save animation function. So let's go over here. We're not going to use this for now, so we could just delete it from the event graph. And then on the left side over here, we can override our blueprint thread save update animation. So let's click this one. And all we really need to do in here is get the speed of the character. So we're going to create a new variable and call that speed. And that's float. So let's drag it in here and set it. And we're going to use the property access system again. So let's look for property access. That's all the way down in here. And then we're going to bind it to the try get pawn owner and then get velocity. So that should be in the list over here somewhere. get velocity, this one. And from the velocity, we're going to drag off and we're going to get the vector length for the X and the Y axis, like this one, and simply plug it into the speed. So this is going to drive our blend space. And that's really all we need. So now we're going to set up the animation graph. And as I mentioned, it's a really basic animation blueprint, so there's not going to be a whole lot going on in here. First of all, let's right click and create a new state machine. Over here, so simply click the state machine and then it creates a new one for us, and I'm going to call this movement, and let's open it up. Again, this is going to be really simple, so I'm going to drag off the entry, add a new state, and this is the idle state. And from the idle state, I'm going to drag off and again create a new state, and this is going to be the jog state, like so. And then we want to drag from the jog state back to the idle state, so we have two transitions. We can go from idle to jog and from jog back to idle. And then inside of the idle state, so let's double click this one first. We're going to set our idle animation, so that's the idle non-combat. Drag it in over here and simply hook it up. Then we do need to select the sequence player, and we want to make sure that we loop the animation. So let's enable looping over here and go back, and we want to set up our jog state. So in here, we're going to simply drag in our blend space that we just created. So the blend space enemy right, plug it in over here, and we're going to plug in our speed variable in here. So that's good to go. And then if we go back to our state machine, let me get rid of the pop-up. We need to set up the transition rules. So I'm going to double click the first one from idle to jogging, and we're going to enable that if we have a speed greater than, well, we could say 0, but I'm going to keep a little bit of a safeguard. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to 3. And then plug it in over here. Let's go back, and then the transition rule from going back to idle, let's double click this one, and we're simply going to say if the speed is smaller than 3 or less than 3, I'm sorry, like so, and then plug it in over here as well. So this is kind of double because we have an idle and a jog state in here, but we also have an idle animation inside of our blend space player. But this works fine, so it's just to show you how to set it up in a normal situation. Okay, so we have that. Let's go back to the animation graph, and we're going to drag off here, and we're going to save a cast pose. So click new save cast pose, and we can give it a name, so I'm going to call this locomotion or something like that. Then we can use this cast pose again. So right click and do use cast pose. Well, let's just look for locomotion, maybe that's easier. So then this pops up like so. Over here we want to add a slot node, so we can play animations. So let's or montages actually. So we're going to drag off here and look for a slot default slot node, and we want to use this to play upper body montages. So we have the slot node selected, and then on the right side over here we are going to set this to our upper body slot, so this one. So don't select upper body in motion or anything like that, just normal upper body slot. And again we're going to drag off this one, and we're going to save a cast pose again. And this is going to be the upper body pose. So, and then we need to blend those together. So we want to use the cast pose locomotion again, and we also want to use our upper body pose. So I'm going to right click and look for upper body, and then we're going to use a layered blend per bone node to actually blend those. So let's drag off here and look for layered blend per bone. So the base pose is the locomotion pose, and then the blend pose is going to be the upper body pose. And then we need to set up the actual node, and I'm going to grab my example project quickly to make sure I don't mess up. So select the node over here, and we need to set up the layers. So let's expand the layers, and we're going to add 3 branch filters in here, and we want to expand those as well. So the first bone name that we're going to select is the pelvis bone. And for the blend depth, we're going to set this to 4. And then for the other 2 bones, we're going to select the thigh bones. So thigh underscore left. And for this one, we're going to set the blend depth to -1. And then we have the thigh right. And we're going to set that to -1 as well. And we want to make sure that we enable the mesh space rotation blend. So enable this tick box over here. And what this basically does, those are simply the bones from the skeleton. So we have the pelvis bone over here. It will blend the animations everywhere upper from the pelvis bone. And because we set the thigh bones to -1, it will not blend those animations into the legs. So that's basically what we're setting up with that node. And that's already our final pose. So we can simply plug this inside of our output pose, compile it and save it. And that should be everything we need for our simple enemy in this case. So that's all. Let's save and close down the animation blueprint. And we want to assign it to our character, obviously. So let's open our right character. And if we select the mesh, then we can assign our new ABP enemy right over here. And now he should actually be animated as well. So compile and save that. So that wasn't too bad. And now let's take a look at setting up some stuff inside of our base enemy. So let's open up the BP enemy base. And we want to get the full blueprint editor so we can actually create a graph in here. And we need a bunch of variables. So the first one we're going to add is the player to attack. And we're going to set this to an actor. So let's look for an actor and then simply an object reference. And we do need to make sure that this one replicates. So with the variable selected on the right side, set it to replicated. And then we want to create a few floats and a few booleans. So let's create another variable, and this is going to be the maximum attack range. So max attack range. This is going to be a float. And we don't need to replicate this one because it's only going to be used by the server. So that's good to go. Then we're going to select the, we're going to create the attack interval. That's a float, and again, it's only going to be used by the server, so we're not going to replicate it. We do want to set a default for this one, so let's compile it, and I'm going to set the default to 1 second, so every second the enemy can attack us. Then let's create 2 more bools. The first one is going to be can attack. Turn it into a boolean. And the second one is going to be is attacking. And that's a boolean as well. And both of those don't need to be replicated either. So this is good to go. So we can set up a little bit of our actual event graph. And I'm going to switch my nodes quickly over here. There we go. So we want to create a new event. We are going to use begin play later, but we can get rid of tick and begin overlap. We're not going to use it. Let's create a new custom event. And I'm going to call this the movement loop. So this is only going to run on the server. So first of all, I'm going to expand the little bubble and say server. So we know where it executes. And we want to check if we can attack or not. And if we can attack, we are going to wait giving an actual move order. So we're going to grab a branch in here and we're going to grab our can attack bool, plug it in. And if this is true, we're going to connect it to a delay. So let's add a delay over here, plug in the true pin, and then the completed pin goes back into the branch. So we can keep the delay at 0.2 seconds, that's fine. And then if this is false, we're actually going to continue with our movement loop. So then we're going to drag off here and we're going to look for AI move to. And we want to get the latent node over here. So let's select this one. The pawn is a reference to ourselves because we are the actual character. And the target actor that we want to move towards is the player to attack. So let's grab our variable and plug that one in over here. So the other settings should be fine. So we could either give a destination or we can use the target actor. We don't need to plug in both. We're going to keep the acceptance radius and we don't need stop on overlap, so that's fine. Then let's drag off this movement result over here and we're going to switch on it. So look for switch and it will give us all the possible results. Now we do want to hook this up to the on success pin and to the on fail pin. So this upper pin will immediately execute when we call this node. And these ones will execute if the movement order is done or if it's blocked or aborted or things like that. So it's a latent node and these pins will take time before they fire. And the upper pin will simply fire immediately if we call this node. Now this is going to be really simple actually. We're going to add a delay in here and we're going to plug in all of the pins except for the success one. So for these ones we want to add a little wait in here. And after that we're simply going to loop back to our branch at the beginning. No, take it easy. So plug it back into the branch. Like so. And if we have a success result, then we're actually going to go back to the branch as well, but we're not going to use the wait. So the wait will make sure you don't get infinite loop error immediately if we have a little delay in here and the path is aborted or something like that. So this should work. And that's really all we need to do for our movement loop. So that's good to go already. Then let's see what we're going to do. We're going to create our attack montage custom event, but we're simply going to use an empty event in here and then override it inside of our child blueprint. So what we want to do is create a new custom event and I'm going to call this the multicast attack montage. So MC attack montage. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a multicast. So we're going to set the replication to multicast over here. And because I already put the MC prefix in here, I'm not going to say all instances, but you can use the comment bubble over here if you would like to. And as I mentioned, we're not going to put anything in here. The only reason we create it inside of our parent blueprint is so that we can override it inside of our child blueprint. So we're going to set that up a little bit later. We do need to create another function in here and we're gonna actually call that one on a timer. So first of all, let's create a new function and I'm gonna call this distance to target. Already. Like so. And in here, first of all, we want to make sure that we have a valid player to attack. So I'm gonna drag off here and use the isValid node with the question mark and plug it in. And if we have a valid target, then we want to know how close we are so we can decide if we either want to attack or not. So we're going to grab a branch in here, plug that into the valid pin. And we're going to use a squared distance again. So I think I mentioned that in the previous video for the Mac as well. So if we use a squared distance, it's cheaper to calculate. So it's going to use a little bit less overhead. And because we're going to loop this function inside of a timer, it could be useful to make it as light as possible. So we're going to grab our player to attack and we're going to get the squared distance to. And then we can simply plug in another actor and that's a reference to ourselves. So we want to get the distance between the enemy and the mech. And because, as I mentioned, this is a squared distance, so we need to compare it to a squared float. And we're going to drag off here and do less or equal than. And then we can drag off here and say multiply. And we're going to multiply it with our maximum attack range. So let's grab that in and simply plug it into both pins. So this is going to be a squared distance as well. And then we can plug that into the condition. So if this is false, then we don't want to attack. So we're going to grab our can attack bool and set it to false. And if this is true, then we want to make sure that we're not already having our can attack boolean to true, just to make sure we don't actually keep executing this code. So we're going to grab a branch, plug in our can attack bool, and if it's false, we're going to set it to true. So from the false pin, plug in a setter and set it to true over here. Then we want to grab our character movement component in here, and we're going to say stop movement immediately. So the lower one, plug that in over here, and this will make sure that the actual AI move to node over here will have the probably the aborted one execute, and then it's going to go to our can attack branch, and we have our can attack to true. So then this function will wait. And in here, the last thing we want to do is call our attack player function, but we don't actually have that yet. No, we don't have it yet. So we're going to go back to the event graph, and we're going to create that custom event. And let's call this attack player. And then inside of our distance to target function, after we stop movement, we want to call our attack player event. So simply plug that in over here. So this is the distance to target function. That's good to go. Now let's set up the attack player event immediately. So we have that out of the way as well. Let me switch my notes quickly. Where did I put it? Oh, over here. Okay. So again, this is going to be a looping function. So the first thing I want to do is grab a branch, plug it in over here. We're going to check if we can attack or not. So plug in our can attack bool. If this is false, we're going to break the loop, so we're not going to do anything. And if this is true, then we want to check if we are already attacking. So we're going to grab another branch and plug in our is attacking bool. And for this one, we are going to hook up a delay again. So plug it into the true pin and then the completed pin back into the branch. So for as long as we are attacking, we're simply going to wait. And then if our is attacking is false, we want to call our multicast attack montage event. So let's call multicast attack montage. And then we're going to grab another delay, plug that in over here, and we're going to wait for our attack interval duration. So we want to plug in that float. And after that, we simply want to loop back to the beginning of the can attack branch. So complete it and then plug it back in here. And let's make sure we make it look a little bit cleaner. Like so. So this will simply loop, and if our can attack variable is false, then the loop will break, and otherwise it will wait while we are attacking, and then after the interval call the new attack montage event again. So pretty simple and pretty basic, but it should work fine for what we want to do. Now we can set up our begin play event. So let's do that as well. And by the way, this is only going to run on the server. So let's make sure we add a server comment in here and pin the bubble. So we're going to go to event begin play. And in here, we also want to make sure that this only executes on the server. So by default, begin play executes on all instances in the game. So let's hook up a branch over here, and we're going to hook up an is server check for the condition. So technically this executes on all instances, but we have our server branch. So in our case, we only going to use the server. So I'm going to add a sort of a hacky way to set up our player to attack right now, and later if we spawn enemies actually from the game mode, then we're not going to use this anymore. But right now we need to make sure that we have the variable actually set to the player so we can test it. So we're going to drag off the true pin, and we're going to get all actors of class, and we simply want to get our max in the level. So let's look for the player mac, BP player mac. And then we're going to get the first entry in the array and simply make that our player to attack. So let's grab a setter, plug it in like so. So I'm going to add a little comment in here, temporary until we spawn from the game mode. Nope, not for the game mode, from the game mode. Like so. Okay, I really can't spell. I had a party last night, so maybe there's still a little bit of alcohol involved. Okay, so this is temporary. Let's make it red, why not? The next thing we want to do is set the focus of our AI. So it will actually stay rotated towards the player to attack. So we're going to simply call set focus. And that's actually an event that comes from the AI controller. So maybe, yeah, we need to grab an AI controller first. So let's right click and get AI controller. And if we drag off the return value, we should be able to set focus. There we go. So not focal point, but focus. And for this one, we can plug in an actor that we want to focus on. So that's going to be our player to attack, the new focus. And let's make sure for the controlled actor, we hook up a reference to ourselves. So we actually get a player controller returned in here. That's good to go. Then we want to loop our distance to target function. So as I mentioned, we're going to use a timer for that one. So drag off and look for timer by function name. And we use this inside of the Mac as well. So we want to grab the distance to target function and simply paste the name in here. So there's no spelling errors. And then we're going to set the time to 0.2 seconds. And we're going to enable looping, and I'm going to expand it and set the initial start delay to minus 0.2, so we don't have to wait 0.2 seconds before the first one executes. So this will loop our distance to target function, and that will make sure that our can attack boolean is set depending on the distance to our target. So that's simple. And then we want to call our movement loop, so we actually start moving. And that should be all we need to do inside of our blueprint, to be honest. Yeah, that should be good. So this is for the base character. Let's compile and save it. And now we want to do a little bit of setup inside of enemy raid. So let's go to the child blueprint, and we're going to go to the event graph in here. And I'm going to switch my notes quickly. So in here we want to set up begin play. So let's look for begin play first. And because this is a child blueprint, we actually override our parent begin play if we call this. So what we want to do is right click and add a call to parent function and hook that up first. So this will make sure that the actual begin play event inside of the parent blueprint still executes, and then we can add some code to it. So we do want to make sure we add an isServer branch in here as well. And then really all we need to do is set our maximum attack range, and that's an inherited variable. So by default it doesn't show up over here. You could enable it like so, or you could simply right click and then look for set maximum attack range, and it will show up in the list as well. So I'm going to disable it over here. And I want to randomize this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is drag off here and do minus, subtract actually. And then in here I'm going to set 1500. And we're going to subtract a random integer in range. So let's right click and look for random integer in range. I'm going to set this to 0 for minimum and maximum 4. And then multiply it by 100. So it will increase or decrease in steps of 100. If I actually type in 0 to 400, then we can get 399, 398. So the differences will be really small. And if we simply use it this way, then we can spread it out a little bit more. So multiply it by 100 and then plug it in over here. That's all we're going to do for the begin play event. So this will make sure that not every enemy will have the exact same maximum attack range, but there's a little bit of variation in there. And the next thing we want to do is override our multicast attack montage event. So let's look for multicast attack montage. And first of all, it will say call function, but we don't want that. We want to add the event so we can override it. So look for event multicast attack montage. And what we want to do in here is simply play a montage. So look for play montage. We're going to use the upper one with the latent node again. The skeletal mesh component is going to be the character mesh. So we can grab it from the components and simply plug it in over here. Then what we're going to do when this node executes, we're going to immediately set our isAttacking bool. So grab the upper pin over here and do isAttacking, and we're going to set it to true. And let's copy and paste the setter. If the montage is completed or if it's interrupted, so grab both of those pins, plug it in, and we're going to set it back to false. Now we need to set up the actual montage that we're going to use, and that's going to be fire a slow montage. So this is in the pack by default, so we can select this one. And that should be all we need to do in here. So let me see if we click the little, not binocular, the thingy on the right here that actually makes us browse to the montage. Then we're going to open this one up. And this is just to show you that the default group in here is set to the upper body slot. So this will make sure that this montage will play inside of our animation blueprint in the slot node that we added. So if we go to the animation graph, over here, the slot upper body, this will make sure the montage will be injected in here. And it's actually a full body montage, but because we use the layered blend over here and then blend it on top of the locomotion, it will only play the upper body. So it's not that the slot over here actually does anything, it's simply a name that you set in here. You can create new slots and all you need to do is enter the name for the slot. You actually define what it does and how it works inside of the animation blueprint. So we do need to make sure that this name over here, the upper body slot, exactly matches the slot that we have set inside of the montage over here. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So that's all I wanted to point out. But by default, it should be set to the upper body slot. So it should be good. Okay, so that's good to go as well. And we can actually run a little test. But we do need to make sure that we have a navigation mesh inside of our level, otherwise the enemy doesn't know where it can walk. So let's go to the window and grab a viewport in here. And let's resize it a little bit. There we go. So for a place actor, we want to look for a NavMeshBounds Volume and simply drag it into the level. And then on the details panel, we can set it up. So let's go to the details, scroll down a bit, and we have the brush settings. So if you use the same size level as I do, I think it should be 8000 by 8000 if I recall correctly. And then simply make sure that the entire level is covered by the actual volume. So place it nicely in the center over here. Oh, I selected the mesh. So there we go. And then we can raise it up a little bit. So I'm going to set the Z to about 300. It doesn't really matter as long as it covers the ground, so it's not really that important. So if we have this set up and we press the P key on our keyboard from the word path, then it will actually turn green, and the green areas over here are the areas where our AI can walk. So if you press the P key, you can make sure that the navigation mesh is actually in place, and if it's green, it should be working. So let's get rid of the P key again, so it looks normal. And then we obviously need a few of our enemies in the level. So we're not going to spawn them in yet, we're going to set that up later. So for now, we can simply grab the BP enemy right and place it in the level to make sure it's actually working. So let's point it somehow in the right direction, and I'm going to copy it 2 or 3 times. So we have a few enemies. It doesn't really matter because at this point we can't kill them yet and they can't shoot at us yet. So the only thing we can actually do is make sure that he moves correctly and the animations are playing. So let's check that out, hit play. And then the enemies should be coming, running towards us as they do. And you can see if they get inside of the maximum attack range, they will start playing the attack montage. And if we move again away from them, they will actually keep following us until they are back inside of the maximum attack range, and then they will start firing. And if we circle around them, they should stay pointed towards us because we set the focus and we enabled the use controller rotation yaw on the actual character. So this should work, and we have a nice base to go for our enemy. So we already passed about 40 minutes, so we're gonna wrap up this episode, and then in the next episode we're gonna create a projectile for our enemy so he can actually fire at us, and we can set up stuff like killing the enemy and things like that. So slowly it's going to be more and more fun. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like on the video. It really helps my channel, so I would greatly appreciate that. And if you want to grab the project files, you can dive into the Discord and I'll make sure those are uploaded for you as well. Okay, thanks for watching. Talk to you later. Bye bye.